The boy's scream cut through the frozen air like a knife. Emma had never seen this child before, but he was running toward her sobbing, calling her mama. Behind him, a cowboy with haunted eyes stared at her like he'd just seen a ghost. His dead wife's ghost. This stranger was about to offer Emma shelter, but she didn't know the man who'd promised to marry her was watching from the hills, planning, waiting. And when he came for her, he wouldn't just take Emma, he'd take the boy too. This is the story of Emma Grace Hartley, the mail-order bride who came west for love, but found herself fighting for survival instead. The boy's scream cut through the frozen air like a knife. Emma Grace Hartley had never seen this child before. She'd never been to Wyoming before today. She'd never been anyone's mother. But this small, trembling boy was running straight toward her across the snow-covered platform, tears streaming down his face, arms reaching for her like she was the answer to every prayer he'd ever whispered. And the man chasing him, the cowboy with haunted eyes and grief carved into his face, was staring at her like he'd just seen a ghost. Her ghost. His dead wife's ghost. This is the story of Emma Grace Hartley, the mail-order bride who came to marry one man but found herself claimed by a broken family who needed her more than she ever imagined. The train lurched to a stop, and Emma's heart stopped with it. Silver Creek, Wyoming territory. December 1878. She was here. After 18 days of travel, after selling everything she owned, after writing her name on letters that promised her to a stranger, she was finally here. Emma pressed her palm flat against her chest, feeling her heartbeat return in hard, painful thuds. Her fingers were numb from the cold that seeped through the train's thin walls. Her dress, the nicest one she owned, was wrinkled beyond repair. And somewhere out there beyond the frost-covered windows, a man named Victor Ashford was supposed to be waiting to make her his wife. She didn't love him. She'd never met him. But love was a luxury Emma had stopped believing in years ago. Silver Creek. The conductor's voice bellowed through the car. "End of the line! Everybody off!" Emma reached beneath her seat for the carpet bag that held everything she owned in this world. 2 dresses, her mother's rosary, a hairbrush with a cracked handle, and 11 letters from Victor Ashford tied together with a ribbon that had once been white but was now gray from handling. 11 letters. That's all she knew of the man she'd agreed to marry. Respectable widower seeks honest woman for marriage, must be willing to work. No questions asked about past. No questions asked about past. Those 3 words had saved her life. Emma stood her legs stiff from sitting and made her way down the narrow aisle. Other passengers pushed past her, families reuniting, businessmen in expensive coats, a preacher clutching his Bible. They all had somewhere to be, someone waiting for them. Did she? The cold hit her the moment she stepped onto the platform. Not the gentle cold of a Massachusetts winter, but something sharper, crueler. A cold that seemed personal, like Wyoming itself was testing her right to be here. Emma pulled her thin shawl tighter and looked around. The platform was crowded despite the weather. Cowboys stomped their boots to stay warm. Women in heavy wool coats hurried toward waiting wagons. Children chased each other through the snow, their laughter high and bright against the gray afternoon sky. But no one approached her. No one called her name. Emma stood perfectly still, her carpet bag clutched in both hands, and waited. Minutes passed. The crowd thinned. The train behind her hissed and groaned, preparing to leave. Still no one came. "You looking for someone, miss?" Emma turned. A station worker stood a few feet away, a broom in his hands and curiosity in his eyes. He was young, maybe 20, with a patchy beard he probably thought made him look older. "Yes." Emma's voice came out steadier than she felt. "I'm looking for Mr. Victor Ashford. He was supposed to meet me here." The worker's expression flickered. Just for a moment, but Emma had spent years reading faces, learning to spot the lie before it was spoken. "Ashford, you say?" The worker scratched his beard. "Can't say I've seen him today, but I reckon he might have gotten held up. Weather's been rough. Do you know where I might find him?" "His address." Another flicker. The worker wouldn't meet her eyes now. "Best ask at the general store. Miss Margaret Brennan knows everybody in town." He walked away before Emma could ask anything else. She stood alone on the platform as the last of the passengers disappeared. The train whistle blew one long, mournful note, and the locomotive began to move, taking with it her last connection to the world she'd left behind. Emma didn't watch it go. Instead, she looked down the main street of Silver Creek and began to walk. The snow crunched beneath her worn boots. Each step felt heavier than the last. Behind her, the train's whistle faded into the distance. Ahead, smoke rose from chimneys into the darkening sky. Silver Creek was a small town, maybe 200 people at most. One main street lined with wooden buildings, a church with a crooked steeple, a saloon already spilling light and noise into the dusk. And somewhere in this town, Victor Ashford was supposed to be waiting. But the station worker's face told Emma everything she needed to know. Something was wrong. The general store was warm at least. A pot-bellied stove crackled in the corner, and the smell of coffee and tobacco hung in the air. Emma stepped inside and felt the eyes of every person in the room turned toward her. 3 men at a table near the window, an elderly couple examining bolts of fabric, a young mother with a baby on her hip, and behind the counter a woman with steel-gray hair and a gaze sharp enough to cut glass. That would be Margaret Brennan. Emma approached the counter, keeping her spine straight and her chin up. She'd learned long ago that showing weakness only invited attack. "Good afternoon." Her voice was steady. "I'm looking for Mr. Victor Ashford. I was told you might know where to find him." The silence that followed was absolute. The men at the table stopped talking. The elderly couple exchanged a look. The young mother pulled her baby closer, as if Emma might contaminate them both just by standing there. Margaret Brennan's eyes traveled slowly over Emma, taking in her worn dress, her thin shawl, her carpet bag with its broken clasp. When she finally spoke, her voice was flat as winter ice. "You're the mail-order bride." It wasn't a question. "Yes, ma'am." Emma kept her voice level. "I'm Emma Hartley. Mr. Ashford and I have been corresponding for several months. We were to be married upon my arrival. Were you now?" One of the men at the table laughed, a short, ugly sound. Emma didn't turn to look at him. "Is there a problem?" she asked. Margaret leaned forward on the counter, and Emma saw something in her expression that might have been pity, or might have been contempt. Sometimes they looked the same. "Victor Ashford left Silver Creek 3 days ago, Miss Hartley. Packed up everything he owned and headed for California." Margaret paused, letting the words sink in. "He ain't coming back." The floor seemed to tilt beneath Emma's feet. "That's not possible," she heard herself say. "He sent me money for the train. He wrote. He sent you money." One of the men pushed back from the table and stood. He was big, with a belly that strained against his vest and small, mean eyes. "Well, ain't that something? Victor Ashford sending money to anyone?" Another man laughed. Probably stole it from the last woman he swindled. Emma's fingers dug into her palms. "I don't understand." "What's to understand?" The big man took a step toward her. "Ashford's a fraud, a con man. He does this every few months. Puts an ad in some eastern newspaper, finds some desperate woman willing to come west, and then disappears before she arrives." He grinned, showing tobacco-stained teeth. "You ain't the first, sweetheart. And you won't be the last." The room was spinning now. Emma gripped the edge of the counter to steady herself. "But he wrote to me. He said he owned a ranch. He says a lot of things." Margaret's voice had softened just slightly. "That's what men like him do. They say pretty words to lonely women, and then they take what they can get." Emma's throat was tight. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. She'd spent every penny she had to get here. She'd burned every bridge left, every connection gambled, everything on a stranger's promise. And it had all been a lie. "What am I supposed to do?" The words came out before she could stop them. Weak, pathetic, exactly the kind of words that invited attack. The big man laughed again. "That ain't our problem, miss. But I reckon a woman like you knows how to earn her keep." His eyes traveled over her body in a way that made her skin crawl. "Pretty thing like you shouldn't have trouble finding work." Emma felt the blood rush to her face. Shame, anger, terror. They mixed together until she couldn't tell them apart. "That's enough, Bill." Everyone turned. A man stood in the doorway of the general store, snow dusting the shoulders of his worn coat. He was tall, lean, with dark hair that needed cutting and a jaw that hadn't seen a razor in days, but it was his eyes that caught Emma's attention. They were brown, nearly black, and they held the kind of emptiness that came from losing something you could never get back. "This ain't your concern, Sam." The big man. Bill squared his shoulders. "I'm making it my concern." The man called Sam stepped into the store, his boots heavy on the wooden floor. "Miss is clearly in distress. Seems to me the Christian thing to do is offer help, not insults. You calling me unchristian, Thornton? I'm calling you a lot of things, Bill. Unchristian's the politest of them." For a moment the air crackled with the promise of violence. Emma held her breath, watching the two men face each other across the length of the store. Then Bill laughed, forced, unconvincing, and stepped back. "Ain't worth the trouble," he muttered. "Come on, boys. Let's get out of here before Thornton starts preaching about charity." The three men filed past Sam, each one careful not to meet his eyes. The elderly couple followed shortly after, murmuring apologies that weren't really apologies at all. The store fell quiet. Emma became aware that she was trembling. Whether from cold or shock or fear, she couldn't tell. Sam Thornton turned to look at her, and she saw something else in those dark, empty eyes. Recognition. Not of her specifically, but of her situation, of what it meant to be alone and desperate and terrified. "You're the woman Ashford was supposed to marry." It wasn't a question. "Yes." Emma's voice was barely a whisper. "And you've got nowhere to go." It wasn't a question either. She didn't answer. Sam was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached up and removed his hat, holding it against his chest in a gesture that felt almost old-fashioned. Respectful. "My name's Daniel Thornton. I own a ranch about 10 miles east of here. My wife passed last winter and I've got a boy. William. He's 7. He needs looking after." He paused as if choosing his next words carefully. "I ain't looking for anything improper, ma'am, but I need help with the house and the boy, and I can offer room and board in exchange. It ain't much, but it's honest work." Emma stared at him. "You don't know me." "No, ma'am. I don't. You don't know anything about me. I could be anyone. I reckon you could." Sam's expression didn't change. "But I know what it looks like when someone's been kicked when they're already down. And I know what it's like to need help when there ain't anyone offering." Emma's throat was tight again, but for different reasons now. "Why would you help me?" Sam's jaw tightened. For the first time, emotion flickered across his face. Pain. Old pain, worn smooth by time but never fully healed. "Because my wife would have wanted me to," he said simply. She was the kind of woman who couldn't stand to see anyone suffer. Didn't matter who they were or where they came from. He paused. "She's been gone 8 months now, and I've been failing at everything she asked me to be. Maybe this is a chance to do one thing right." Before Emma could respond, the store's door burst open. A small figure flew through the entrance. A boy, maybe 7 years old, with dark hair plastered to his forehead and panic written across his face. "Papa!" he screamed. "Papa, you got to come!" "The barn." And then the boy saw Emma. He stopped mid-sentence, mid-step, mid-breath. His eyes went wide, his face went pale. "William!" Sam's voice sharpened with concern. "William, what about the barn?" But William wasn't listening to his father. He was staring at Emma with an expression that made her blood run cold. It was the look of someone who'd just seen something impossible, something miraculous, something terrifying. "Mama." The word came out as a whisper. "Mama, is that you?" Emma's heart stopped. "William." Sam moved toward his son, his voice strained. "William, that's not Mama." The boy launched himself across the store, moving faster than Emma thought possible. Before she could react, before she could speak, before she could do anything at all, William had thrown himself at her, his small arms wrapping around her waist with desperate strength. "Mama, Mama, Mama." He was sobbing now, his whole body shaking. "You came back. I knew you'd come back. I prayed every night and you came back." Emma stood frozen, the boy clinging to her like she was the only solid thing in a world that had tilted off its axis. "I'm sorry," she heard herself say. Her voice sounded strange, distant. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart, but I'm not. You are." William looked up at her, and Emma saw his mother's ghost in his eyes, saw what this boy had lost, saw the crater it had left in his small soul. "You look just like her. You have the same hair and the same eyes, and you even smell like her." Emma's chest was so tight she could barely breathe. She looked at Daniel, desperate for help, and found him standing motionless, his face a mask of agony. "He does this," Daniel said, his voice barely audible. "Sees her everywhere, in every woman who passes through town." He swallowed hard. "But he's never run to anyone before. He's never." William was still crying, still clutching Emma's dress with white-knuckled hands. "Don't go away again," the boy pleaded. "Please don't go away again. I'll be good. I'll be so good. I'll do all my chores, and I won't complain about eating vegetables, and I won't." "Sweetheart." Emma's hands moved of their own accord, settling on the boy's thin shoulders. She could feel his bones through his shirt, could feel him trembling. "Sweetheart, look at me." William looked up, tears streaming down his face. "My name is Emma Grace Hartley. I came here on a train today from very far away. I've never been to Wyoming before. I've never met you before." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I'm not your mama." William's face crumpled. "But you look like her." I know I do." Emma didn't know that. Not really. But something told her it was true. "But I'm not her. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." For a long moment William just stared at her. Emma watched the hope drain from his eyes like water from a broken cup, watched the devastation settle in its place. And then the boy did something that broke her heart completely. He didn't let go. He pressed his face against her dress and held on tighter. And when he spoke, his voice was so small she could barely hear it. "Can you stay anyway?" Emma's eyes burned. She blinked rapidly, refusing to let the tears fall. "William." Daniel's voice was rough. "William, come here. Let Miss Hartley go." "No." William's grip tightened. "No, Papa. Please. Please let her stay. Please." "William, I know she's not Mama." The boy's voice cracked. "I know. But she's nice, Papa. She didn't push me away. She didn't laugh at me like Mrs. Crawford did. She talked to me like I mattered." He looked up at Emma, his face streaked with tears and snot and desperate hope. "Please, please, can she come home with us?" Just for a little while, Emma's throat was so tight she could barely breathe. She looked at Daniel and found him looking back at her. And in that moment, something passed between them, something unspoken but understood. They were both broken. They were both lost. And somehow this small boy had found a way to tether them together. "Ma'am." Daniel's voice was formal. "Careful. I made you an offer before my son interrupted. I want you to know that offer still stands. No more, no less than what I said. Room and board for honest work. Nothing improper expected or wanted." Emma should have refused. She knew that. Every instinct she'd developed over years of surviving on her own told her to run, to get out of this situation before it became more complicated than she could handle. But William was still clinging to her dress. And Daniel was looking at her with eyes that had seen the same darkness she knew. And somewhere outside the snow was falling harder, and she had $11 to her name and nowhere in the world to go. "All right," she heard herself say. "I'll come with you." William's face transformed. The grief didn't disappear. It was still there, lurking beneath the surface. But something else joined it, something that looked dangerously like hope. "Thank you," Daniel said quietly. "I'll get the wagon. We should leave before the storm gets worse." He settled his hat back on his head and walked toward the door. But before he reached it, he paused and looked back at his son. "William," he said gently, "you need to let Miss Hartley go now." William hesitated. Then slowly, reluctantly, he released his grip on Emma's dress. But he didn't step away. He stood right beside her, close enough that his shoulder brushed against her hip. "Can I hold your hand?" he asked. Just until we get to the wagon, Emma looked down at this small wounded boy who'd just called her mama in front of a store full of strangers, who'd clung to her like she was his last hope in a world that had already taken too much from him. She should say no. She should establish boundaries. She should protect both of them from the inevitable pain that was coming. Instead, she held out her hand. William's fingers wrapped around hers, small and cold and trusting, and Emma felt something shift inside her chest, something that had been locked away for a very long time. "Come on," she said softly. "Let's go home." The wagon ride was quiet. Daniel sat at the front handling the reins with the ease of long practice. Emma sat behind him on a bench made soft with blankets. William pressed against her side like a small warm shadow. The boy hadn't let go of her hand since they'd left the store. Emma watched the town of Silver Creek disappear behind them, swallowed by snow and distance. She thought about Victor Ashford, the man who'd promised her a new life and delivered her into humiliation instead. She thought about the money she'd spent on train fare, money she'd saved for 3 years penny by penny, dream by dream. She thought about the faces of the people in that store, the contempt, the pity, the mean-spirited glee of Bill and his friends who'd looked at her like she was something to be used up and thrown away. And then she thought about Daniel Thornton, who'd stepped between her and that cruelty without asking for anything in return, who'd offered her shelter because his dead wife would have wanted him to, who was carrying his own grief like a stone around his neck and somehow still found room to help a stranger. "Miss Emma," William's voice pulled her from her thoughts. "Yes. Are you sad?" Emma looked down at the boy's upturned face. His eyes were still red from crying, but there was something else in them now. Concern. For her. "A little," she admitted. "Today didn't go the way I expected, because the man you were supposed to marry wasn't there." "Yes." William was quiet for a moment, processing this. "I'm glad he wasn't there," he said finally. Emma blinked. "Why?" "Because if he was there, you would have married him. And then you couldn't come home with us." The simple logic of it, the child's faith that everything happened for a reason, made Emma's chest ache. "William," she said carefully, "you know I'm not staying forever, right? I'm just going to help out for a little while, until I can figure out what to do next." William gripped her hand harder. "I know," he said. But his voice said something different. His voice said he was already planning ways to make her stay. Emma didn't have the heart to argue. The Thornton Ranch appeared through the snow like a promise. It was modest, a 2-story house with a wraparound porch, a barn that needed painting, a chicken coop, a fence that listed slightly to one side. Everything about it said working family, said honest labor, said this is what we built with our own hands. But there was something else too. Something Emma noticed the moment the wagon pulled into the yard. The curtains in the windows hung crooked. The garden was buried under snow, but she could see the dead stalks of plants that hadn't been harvested before the frost. A child's toy, a wooden horse, lay abandoned on the porch steps, half covered in white. This was a house that had stopped being tended, a home that had lost its heart. Daniel pulled the wagon to a stop and climbed down without a word. He came around to help Emma, offering his hand with that same formal courtesy he'd shown in the store. "It ain't much," he said, and for the first time she heard something like shame in his voice. "House needs work. Everything needs work. I haven't been able to keep up." "It's fine," Emma said, and she meant it. After the boarding houses she'd lived in, after the factory dormitories with their thin walls and thinner mattresses, this place looked like a palace. William jumped down from the wagon and grabbed Emma's hand again, tugging her toward the house. "Come on, I want to show you my room. And the kitchen. Mama used to make the best biscuits in the kitchen. Do you know how to make biscuits Papa tries, but they always come out like rocks. He says Mama took the recipe with her to heaven and won't share." "William." Daniel's voice was gentle but firm. "Let Miss Hartley catch her breath. She's had a long journey." William's face fell, but he nodded and released Emma's hand. "Sorry," he mumbled. "It's all right," Emma said. She reached out and touched his shoulder lightly. "I'd love to see your room. Just give me a few minutes to warm up first, okay?" The smile that spread across William's face was like sunrise breaking through storm clouds. "Okay, I'll go get ready. I'll clean up my toys and everything." He raced toward the house, boots pounding on the snow-covered steps. The door banged shut behind him. Emma and Daniel stood alone in the yard. "He gets attached," Daniel said quietly. "Too quick, too deep. His mama was the same way." He paused, his jaw tightening. "I should warn you. He's going to test your limits. He's going to push and push, trying to see if you'll leave, trying to make you prove you're not going anywhere." Emma looked at him. "And what should I do when that happens?" Daniel's grip tightened on the wagon. "I don't know," he admitted. "I've been failing that test since the day she died." Emma studied this man, this stranger who'd rescued her from humiliation and was now confessing his failures like they were sins he needed to atone for. "Why did you really offer to help me?" she asked. "And don't tell me it's because your wife would have wanted it. That's part of it, but it's not all of it." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. "Because you didn't flinch," he said finally. "What?" "In the store. When Bill was saying those things to you. When everyone was staring." Daniel's voice was low, rough. "You didn't flinch, didn't cry, didn't beg. You just stood there. Took it like you'd taken worse and survived." Emma felt something cold move through her chest. "That's not strength," she said. "That's just practice." "Maybe." Daniel settled his hat lower on his head. "But I've seen people break under less. Seen them give up, give in, let the world grind them down until there's nothing left." He met her eyes. "You didn't break. And I reckon I needed to see that. Needed to see that someone could take a hit and stay standing. Because most days, I ain't sure I can do it myself." The honesty of it stunned her. Before she could respond, the front door burst open again. "Miss Emma!" William's voice was urgent. "Come quick. The fire in the stove went out and it's so cold in here." Emma looked at Daniel. Something passed between them. Not understanding, not yet. But the beginning of something. The acknowledgement that they were both standing at the edge of the same cliff, both afraid of falling, both too tired to walk away. "We should go inside," Emma said. "Yeah." Daniel picked up her carpet bag from the wagon. "We should." They walked toward the house together, their breath making clouds in the frozen air. And as Emma stepped across the threshold, leaving the cold behind, she allowed herself one small, dangerous thought. Maybe this could work. Maybe she'd finally found a place to belong. She didn't know, then couldn't know, that Victor Ashford wasn't gone at all, that he was watching this ranch from the hills above town, making plans that would test everything she thought she knew about survival. She didn't know that the real fight was just beginning. All she knew was that a small boy's hand had found hers again in the darkness of the house, and for the first time in years, she didn't want to let go. The fire took 3 attempts to light. Emma's fingers were numb, clumsy from cold, but she refused to let Daniel see her struggle. She'd spent 10 years lighting stoves in factory dormitories and boarding houses. She wasn't about to be defeated by a cast-iron stove in Wyoming. "Got it," she said as flames finally caught the kindling. William cheered from the doorway. "See, Papa? I told you she could do it." Daniel said nothing. He stood by the kitchen table, watching Emma with an expression she couldn't read. Not suspicion exactly. Something closer to disbelief. "The woodbox is nearly empty," Emma observed, straightening up. "Is there more in the barn? I'll fetch it." Daniel reached for his coat. "William, show Miss Hartley where things are. And don't be a pest. I know, Papa." William grabbed Emma's hand and tugged. "Come on, I'll show you Mama's kitchen." The words hit Emma like a fist to the chest. Mama's kitchen. Not the kitchen. Not our kitchen. Mama's. Everything in this house still belonged to a ghost. William pulled her through the doorway, chattering about which drawer held the spoons and where his mama kept the sugar and how the pantry door stuck if you didn't lift it just right. Emma listened, nodded, filed away each piece of information. But her eyes were cataloging something else entirely. Dust on every surface. Dishes piled in the sink crusted with food that had been there for days. A pot on the stove with something burned black at the bottom. Cobwebs in the corners. A child's drawing tacked to the wall, its edges curling with age. 8 months. Daniel had said his wife died 8 months ago. This house hadn't been cleaned in at least that long, and this is where Mama kept her recipe book. William was saying, pulling open a drawer. See? She wrote everything down so she wouldn't forget. But she never needed to look. She knew all the recipes by heart. He held up a small leather journal, its pages soft with use. Emma took it carefully, reverently, as if it might crumble in her hands. "Can I look at this?" "Sure. Maybe you can make her biscuits." William's face was so hopeful it hurt. "Papa says they're impossible without Mama, but maybe you could do it. You look like her. Maybe you cook like her too." Emma opened the journal. The handwriting inside was neat and precise, each recipe accompanied by small notes in the margins. Daniel likes extra butter. William won't eat raisins. Add a pinch of cinnamon, don't tell anyone. These weren't just recipes, they were love letters. Messages from a woman who'd expected to cook these meals for decades, not knowing her time was running out. Emma closed the journal gently. "I'll try," she said. "I can't promise they'll be as good as your Mama's, but I'll try." William's smile could have lit the whole house. The back door banged open, and Daniel appeared with an armload of firewood. His eyes went immediately to the journal in Emma's hands. "She found Mama's recipes," William announced. "She's going to make biscuits." Daniel's jaw tightened just slightly, just enough for Emma to notice. "That's so," he said. "If you don't mind." Emma set the journal on the counter carefully. "I thought I might make supper tonight. Give you both a proper meal. You don't have to. I want to." Emma met his eyes. "You offered me a job, Mr. Thornton. Let me do it." Something flickered in Daniel's expression. Respect, maybe, or relief. "All right," he said. "I'll get more wood." He was gone before she could respond. William tugged at her sleeve. "Papa's always like that. Mama used to say he had more feelings than words. Said he kept everything locked up inside like a bank vault." Emma knelt down to meet his eyes. "Your Mama sounds like she was very wise." "She was." William's voice went small. "She was the wisest person in the whole world." Emma studied the boy's face. 7 years old. So young. Too young to have lost so much. "William, can I ask you something?" "Sure. Do I really look like her?" "Your Mama." William studied her face with an intensity that was almost unsettling in someone so young. "Your hair's the same color," he said slowly. "And your eyes, and the way you smile. You don't smile with your mouth first, you smile with your eyes like she did." He paused. "But you're different too. How Mama was soft, like bread dough before you bake it. Warm and soft, and she hugged like she never wanted to let go." William's voice dropped to a whisper. "You're harder, like you've been baked already, like something hurt you and made you tough." Emma's throat closed up. 7 years old. This child was 7 years old, and he could see right through her. "You're right," she said quietly. "Something did hurt me. A lot of somethings, actually. Is that why you came here, to get away from the somethings?" "Yes." William nodded seriously. "That's okay. Mama always said home was where you went to heal. Maybe you can heal here too." Emma didn't trust herself to speak. She just pulled the boy into a hug, holding him tight, feeling his small arms wrap around her neck. She'd known this child for less than 3 hours. She already knew she would die to protect him. The first week passed in a blur of work. Emma attacked the house like it was an enemy to be conquered. She scrubbed floors until her knuckles bled. She washed windows until they sparkled. She beat rugs and aired linens and organized cupboards and cleared away 8 months of accumulated grief. Daniel watched her with a mixture of gratitude and something that looked almost like guilt. "You don't have to work so hard," he said one evening, finding her on her hands and knees scrubbing the kitchen floor. "I didn't hire you to kill yourself. I'm not killing myself." Emma sat back on her heels, pushing hair from her face. "I'm fixing things. There's a difference." "Is there?" The question hung between them, heavy with meaning neither of them was ready to address. Emma returned to scrubbing. "The pantry needs restocking. I made a list. Is there a day you go to town for supplies Saturday usually? I'll come with you, see if anyone in Silver Creek is hiring for sewing work. I'm good with a needle. Might be able to bring in some extra income." Daniel's expression darkened. "You don't need extra income. Room and board, that was the deal, and I appreciate it. But I won't be a burden longer than I have to be." "You're not a burden." The words came out fierce, almost angry. Emma looked up, startled. Daniel's fists curled at his sides. His jaw was tight. "Sorry," he said after a moment. "I didn't mean to. I just—" He took a breath. "Catherine, my wife, she always said I had a temper like summer lightning. Comes out of nowhere. Disappears just as fast." "Catherine." Emma said the name carefully. That was her name. "Yeah." Daniel's voice softened. "Catherine Ann Thornton. Most beautiful woman I ever saw. Walked into the general store in Silver Creek 15 years ago, and I forgot how to talk. Just stood there staring like a fool until Maggie Brennan threw a dish rag at my head." Emma felt something shift in her chest. Not jealousy. She had no claim on this man's heart. But something. Longing, maybe, for the kind of love he was describing. "How did you finally talk to her?" "Didn't." A ghost of a smile crossed Daniel's face. "She talked to me. Walked right up bold as brass and said, 'You going to stand there catching flies, or are you going to offer to carry my packages?' Nearly swallowed my own tongue. She sounds brave. Bravest person I ever knew." The smile faded, right up until the end. Emma stopped scrubbing. "What happened? If you don't mind my asking." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was distant. "Fever came through last winter. Bad one. Half the territory was laid up with it. Catherine caught it first, probably from nursing the Henderson kids when their mama got sick." He paused. "She was fine for a few days. Then she wasn't." "How long 5 days?" Daniel's hands opened and closed. 5 days from the first cough to the last breath. Doc Hartley came out twice, but there wasn't anything to do. She just faded, like a candle burning down. Emma thought of her own mother, coughing blood into a handkerchief, growing thinner and grayer until she simply stopped existing. "I'm sorry," she said. "I know those words don't help, but I'm sorry." William was with her at the end. Daniel's voice cracked. "I'd gone to the barn to check on a sick calf. Wasn't gone more than 20 minutes when I came back." He stopped, swallowed hard. "He won't talk about it. What happened while I was gone. What she said to him. He just shuts down whenever I ask." Emma's heart broke all over again. Maybe he's not ready. Maybe. Daniel looked at her, and in his eyes she saw the full weight of his guilt. Or maybe he blames me for not being there, for letting him face it alone. He was with her. She wasn't alone. That matters, Daniel. That matters more than anything. The use of his first name surprised them both. Emma felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I'm sorry." "Mr. Thornton, I shouldn't have. Daniel's fine." His voice was rough. "Mr. Thornton was my father, and he was a mean old bastard who beat his sons for fun. I'd rather not carry his name any more than I have to." Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Daniel's stiffness, his formality, the way he held himself apart from everyone, even his own son. He'd been taught that love came with fists. "Daniel, then," Emma said softly. "And you can call me Emma." Their eyes met. Something passed between them, fragile, uncertain, but real. Then William's footsteps thundered down the stairs, breaking the moment. "Miss Emma, Papa, come quick, there's a man on a horse outside." Emma's blood went cold. She didn't know why. She had no reason to fear a stranger. But something in William's voice, something urgent and afraid, sent ice through her veins. Daniel was already moving. He grabbed his rifle from above the door and checked that it was loaded. "Stay here," he told Emma. "Both of you." He was out the door before she could argue. Emma grabbed William's hand and pulled him back from the window, but not before she caught a glimpse of the rider. Her heart stopped. She knew that horse. She knew that coat. She knew that self-satisfied posture, the way the man sat in the saddle, like he owned everything he surveyed. Victor Ashford hadn't gone to California after all. "Miss Emma." William's voice was scared. "Who is that man?" Emma couldn't answer. Her throat had closed up completely. Through the window she watched Daniel approach the rider, watched them exchange words she couldn't hear, watched Victor gesture toward the house toward her with a smile that made her skin crawl. "Miss Emma, you're hurting my hand." She looked down. Her grip on William's fingers had turned white-knuckled. "Sorry." She forced herself to let go. "Sorry, sweetheart. Stay here, okay? Stay away from the windows. But, please, William, just do this for me." Something in her voice must have communicated the seriousness, because William nodded and backed away from the window, pressing himself against the far wall. Emma moved to the door. Her hand was shaking as she reached for the handle. Outside she could hear Daniel's voice, low and dangerous. "Don't know what you're talking about. There's no woman here. Come now, Mr. Thornton." Victor's voice was smooth as oil. "I saw the wagon tracks. I know she's here. And I must say I'm disappointed. I thought men of the West had a code of honor. Stealing another man's bride hardly seems honorable, does it? She ain't your bride. She ain't anyone's bride. She's my housekeeper, and you've got no claim on her." "Ah, but that's where you're wrong." Emma heard papers rustling. "I have a contract, signed by Miss Hartley herself. She agreed to marry me in exchange for passage to Wyoming. She's taken my money and broken her word. In most courts, that's called breach of promise." Emma's stomach turned to ice. She hadn't taken his money. She'd paid for her own passage, borrowed every penny from Mrs. Sullivan, the boarding-house keeper who'd let her go. But Victor was holding papers. Contracts she'd signed months ago before she knew what kind of man he was. "I don't give a damn about your papers." Daniel's voice was steel. "Get off my land. This doesn't have to be unpleasant, Mr. Thornton. Just send the woman out. I'll take her off your hands, and you can go back to your simple life. I said get off my land." A long pause. Emma held her breath. "Very well." Victor's voice had lost its smoothness. Underneath was something cold, something dangerous. "But this isn't over. That woman is mine by contract, and I always collect what's owed to me." Hoofbeats. Receding into the distance. Emma's knees gave out. She sank to the floor, her back against the door, her whole body shaking. "Miss Emma." William was beside her in an instant, his small hands on her face. "Miss Emma, what's wrong? Who was that man? Why are you crying?" She hadn't realized she was crying. The door opened behind her, and Emma scrambled to her feet. Daniel stood in the doorway, rifle still in his hands, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. That was Victor Ashford. It wasn't a question. Emma nodded. "The man you were supposed to marry." Another nod. Daniel's jaw tightened. "He's got papers. Says you signed a contract." "I did." Emma's voice came out as a whisper. "Months ago. Before I knew what he was. Before I knew he'd done this to other women." Other women. That's what they said at the store, that he's done this before, found women through advertisements, taken their money, then disappeared. Emma hugged herself. "I didn't give him money. I swear to you, Daniel, I paid my own way. But I don't have proof." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Emma watched his face, waiting for the accusation, waiting for him to tell her to leave, to take her problems with her, to stop dragging his family into her mess. Instead, he set the rifle back on its hooks and turned to face her. "Doesn't matter." Emma blinked. "What doesn't matter if you have proof or not? Doesn't matter what papers he's waving around." Daniel's voice was hard as iron. "You're under my roof. That makes you my responsibility. And I don't let anyone take what's mine. I'm not. You are." Daniel cut her off. "For as long as you're here, you're under my protection. And Victor Ashford is going to learn real fast what happens when someone threatens my people." Emma stared at him. No one had ever protected her before. Not her mother, who'd been too sick to protect anyone. Not the factory supervisors who'd worked her half to death. Not the boarding house owners who'd looked the other way when men came sniffing around. She'd always protected herself. But now this man, this stranger she'd known for less than a week, was standing between her and danger like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Why?" she asked. Daniel frowned. "Why what? Why would you do this for me? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything." Why risk making an enemy of a man like Ashford? For a long moment Daniel didn't answer. Then he did something unexpected. He smiled. It was small, barely a curve of his lips, but it transformed his face, made him look younger, made him look like the man he'd been before grief carved him hollow. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said simply, "and because Catherine would have had my hide if I did anything less." William, who'd been watching this exchange with wide eyes, suddenly threw himself at his father. "I knew it," he crowed. "I knew you'd protect her. You're a hero, Papa, like in the stories Mama used to tell." Daniel caught his son lifting him up. "I ain't a hero, William, just a man trying to do right. That's what heroes say." William squirmed around to look at Emma. "See, I told you you're safe here. Papa won't let anyone hurt you." Emma looked at this man and this boy, her strange, broken, accidental family, and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. But even as hope flickered to life in her chest, she knew this wasn't over. Victor Ashford had promised to come back, and men like him always kept their promises. Saturday came too fast. Emma stood in front of the mercantile, her heart pounding against her ribs. She'd insisted on coming to town despite Daniel's protests. She needed thread and fabric if she was going to start taking in sewing work. She needed to prove she could contribute. She needed to not be a coward. Daniel had dropped her off with a warning. "Don't let anyone get to you. Whatever they say, however they look at you, it's just words. They can't hurt you unless you let them." Easy for him to say. He hadn't spent his whole life being judged and found wanting. The bell above the door jingled as Emma entered. Margaret Brennan looked up from behind the counter. Her expression didn't change, but something in her posture shifted, hardened. "Mrs. Thornton's housekeeper," she said. "Not Emma, not Miss Hartley, just a label." "Good morning, Mrs. Brennan." Emma kept her voice steady. "I need thread, please, white and brown, and whatever fabric you have that's suitable for mending." Margaret didn't move to help her. "Heard Victor Ashford came by the Thornton place earlier this week." Emma's stomach tightened. News traveled fast in small towns. She'd forgotten that. "Yes, ma'am." "Heard Daniel sent him away with a flea in his ear." "Yes, ma'am." Margaret studied her for a long moment. Emma felt like a bug under glass. "You know what people are saying, don't you?" Emma lifted her chin. "I can imagine. They're saying you've got Daniel Thornton wrapped around your finger, that you set this whole thing up, the abandoned bride routine, to worm your way into a widower's house and his bed." The words hit like physical blows. Emma felt blood rush to her face. "That's not true. Doesn't matter if it's true." Margaret's voice was flat. "What matters is what people believe. And right now they believe you're a schemer who's taking advantage of a grieving man. Then people are wrong." Emma's voice shook, but she didn't look away. "I didn't ask for any of this. I came here to marry Victor Ashford because I had nowhere else to go. When he abandoned me, Daniel offered me work, honest work, and I took it. That's all." "Is it?" "Yes." Margaret was silent for a moment. Then, unexpectedly, she laughed. "You've got spine, girl. I'll give you that." She reached under the counter and produced a bolt of brown fabric. "Most women in your position would be crying by now, or lying through their teeth. I don't cry in public, and I'm a terrible liar." Margaret cut the fabric with quick, efficient strokes. Catherine was the same way. Spine like an iron rod and no patience for dishonesty. She looked up. "You really do look like her, you know. First time you walked in here I thought I was seeing a ghost." Emma's throat tightened. William said the same thing. "Poor child." Margaret's expression softened fractionally. "He's been lost since she passed. Daniel too, though he hides it better." She wrapped the fabric in brown paper. "Thread's on the shelf behind you. Help yourself." Emma selected the thread she needed and returned to the counter. When she reached for her money, Margaret held up a hand. "Put it away. I can pay." "I said put it away." Margaret's voice was firm. "Consider it a welcome to Silver Creek. God knows you didn't get much of one last week." Emma didn't know what to say. She'd expected hostility, not kindness. "Thank you," she managed. Margaret nodded curtly. "Don't thank me yet. People in this town have long memories and longer tongues. You've got an uphill battle ahead of you, Miss Hartley. Whether you climb it or fall is up to you." Emma tucked the package under her arm. "I've been climbing uphill my whole life, Mrs. Brennan. I'm not about to stop now." She was halfway to the door when Margaret's voice stopped her. "Miss Hartley." Emma turned. Margaret's expression was strange, almost reluctant. "Victor Ashford isn't a man to cross lightly. He's got friends in this town, important friends. If he decides to make trouble for you—" She paused. "Be careful. That's all I'm saying. Thank you for the warning." "Wasn't a warning, just a fact." Margaret returned her attention to her ledger. "Now get on home before people start talking more than they already are." Emma walked out into the winter air, her mind churning. Important friends. Victor had important friends in Silver Creek. Who? The sheriff? The banker? One of the ranchers? She was so lost in thought that she almost walked straight into the man blocking her path. Miss Hartley. Emma's blood turned to ice. Victor Ashford stood before her, his smile wide and dangerous. "What a pleasant surprise. I was just thinking about you." Emma took a step back. "Stay away from me." "Now, is that any way to greet your fiancé?" Victor moved closer. "We have unfinished business, you and I. Contracts to honor. Promises to keep. I'm not your fiancé. I never was. The papers say otherwise." Victor's smile didn't reach his eyes. "And I'm a man who believes in the sanctity of legal documents." "Aren't you?" Emma's hands were shaking. She clenched them into fists, hiding them in the folds of her skirt. "Daniel Thornton told you to leave me alone. Daniel Thornton is a dirt farmer with delusions of importance." Victor's voice hardened. "He's nothing, less than nothing. And if he thinks he can steal what belongs to me, he's about to learn a very painful lesson. I don't belong to you. You signed a contract. Contracts can be broken." Victor laughed. A cold, ugly sound. "Oh, Emma. Sweet, naive Emma." He reached out and touched her face. She flinched away. "You really think running to some pathetic widower is going to save you?" Victor's voice dropped to a whisper. "I've destroyed better women than you. Women with money, with connections, with families who tried to protect them. You have nothing. You are nothing. And when I'm done with you, everyone in this territory will know it." "Is there a problem here?" The voice came from behind Emma. Deep, dangerous, familiar. "Daniel." Victor's expression flickered just for a moment. Then his smile returned smooth and false. "Mr. Thornton. What a coincidence." "Ain't no coincidence." Daniel stepped forward, positioning himself between Emma and Victor. "Saw your horse outside the mercantile. Figured you might be causing trouble." "Trouble? I was simply having a conversation with my fiancée." "She ain't your fiancée, and this conversation is over." Victor's smile tightened. "You're making a mistake, Thornton. This woman is legally bound to me. I have documents. I don't care if you have the Constitution itself." Daniel's voice was deadly calm. "You come near her again, I'll put a bullet in you. That clear enough?" The two men stared at each other. Emma could feel the tension crackling between them. Then Victor laughed softly. "Very clear, Mr. Thornton. Very clear indeed." He stepped back, tipping his hat. "Good day to you both. I'm sure we'll be seeing each other again soon." He walked away, unhurried, confident. Emma waited until he disappeared around a corner before she let herself breathe. "Thank you," she whispered. Daniel's hand found hers, squeezed once. "Let's go home." Home. The word wrapped around her like a blanket. She followed him to the wagon without looking back. But she could feel Victor's eyes on her, watching, waiting, planning, and she knew with terrible certainty that this was only the beginning. 3 days passed without incident. Emma didn't trust it. She went through the motions of daily life, cooking, cleaning, tending to William. But her eyes kept drifting to the windows, her ears strained for hoofbeats. Every creak of the house made her heart stutter. Victor Ashford was out there somewhere, watching, waiting, planning. "You're wearing a hole in the floor." Emma jumped. Daniel stood in the kitchen doorway, his expression unreadable. "Sorry." She forced herself to step away from the window. "I can't seem to settle. Can't blame you for that." Daniel moved past her to pour himself coffee. "But jumping at shadows won't help. Man like Ashford, he wants you scared. Don't give him the satisfaction. Easy to say when you're not the one he's hunting." Daniel turned to face her. "He's hunting both of us now. I made that clear when I told him to stay away from you." Emma's throat tightened. "I'm sorry. I never meant to drag you into this. You didn't drag me anywhere." Daniel's voice softened. "I stepped in of my own free will. That's what neighbors do out here. We look out for each other. Is that what we are, neighbors?" The question hung between them. Daniel's eyes held hers for a long moment. "I reckon we're something," he said finally. "Not sure what yet, but something." Before Emma could respond, William came barreling down the stairs. "Papa! Miss Emma! There's riders coming. 3 of them." Emma's blood went cold. Daniel was already moving. He grabbed his rifle and checked the chamber in one smooth motion. "Stay inside," he ordered. "Both of you. Lock the doors." He was gone before she could argue. Emma grabbed William and pulled him back from the window. Her hands were shaking, but she forced her voice to stay calm. "William, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Can you do that?" William nodded, his face pale. "If something happens, if those men get into the house, I want you to run. Go out the back door through the barn and ride to town as fast as you can. Find Sheriff Cooper and tell him what happened. But I can't leave you." "Yes, you can." Emma gripped his shoulders. "Promise me, William. Promise me you'll run if things go bad." William's lower lip trembled. "I promise. Good boy." She pulled him into a fierce hug. "Good, brave boy." Through the window, she watched Daniel approach the 3 riders. They'd stopped at the edge of the property, close enough to see, but far enough to claim they weren't trespassing. Victor wasn't among them. That terrified Emma more than if he'd been leading the charge. Daniel's voice carried across the yard. "Help you gentlemen with something?" The lead rider, a big man with a scar across his cheek, tipped his hat. "Just passing through, Mr. Thornton. No need for the rifle." "I'll decide what there's need for. State your business." "Like I said, just passing through." The man's eyes drifted to the house, to the window where Emma stood watching. "Nice place you've got here. Shame if anything happened to it." Daniel's rifle came up. That sounded like a threat. "Did it? My apologies." The man smiled. "A cold, ugly thing. Winters can be rough out here. Fires start easy. Barns burn. Sometimes people get hurt." He paused. "Just an observation." Emma's hands clenched into fists. "Get off my land," Daniel said. "We're on the road. Public property." The man's smile widened. "But we'll be moving along. Got places to be." He tipped his hat again. "Give our regards to Miss Hartley. Mr. Ashford sends his compliments." The 3 riders turned their horses and rode away at a leisurely pace. Daniel watched them until they disappeared over the ridge. Then he walked back to the house, his jaw set like stone. Emma met him at the door. "What do we do?" she asked. "We prepare." Daniel's voice was grim. "Those men were sending a message. Ashford wants us scared, wants us to know he can reach us whenever he wants." "Can he?" Daniel didn't answer, which was answer enough. "I should leave." The words tasted like ash in Emma's mouth. "Take myself out of the equation. If I'm not here." "No." "Daniel, be reasonable." I said no." Daniel grabbed her shoulders, his grip fierce. "You run now, he wins. You spend the rest of your life running, and he spends the rest of his hunting. That's not living, Emma. That's barely surviving. At least you and William would be safe. We wouldn't be safe. We'd be complicit." Daniel's eyes burned into hers. "You think I could live with myself knowing I let a man like Ashford drive an innocent woman from my home? You think William could? After everything he's already lost?" Emma's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. "I've always known what to do. Keep my head down, work hard, survive. But this, I don't know how to fight someone like him. You don't have to fight alone." Daniel's grip gentled. "That's what I've been trying to tell you. You've got me. You've got William. And whether you believe it or not, you've got this town. This town thinks I'm a schemer who seduced a widower. Some of them think that. Others are starting to see the truth." Daniel released her shoulders. "Maggie Brennan told me what happened at the store. Said you stood up to her. Said you didn't cry, didn't beg, didn't lie. That counts for something in Silver Creek. Does it count enough to stop Victor Ashford?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "We're about to find out." That night, Emma couldn't sleep. She lay in her narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to every sound. The wind against the windows, the creak of settling wood, the distant howl of a coyote, and underneath it all the memory of that scarred man's voice. Fires start easy, barns burn. Sometimes people get hurt. She was still awake when she heard the footsteps, soft, careful, coming from downstairs. Emma's heart stopped. She reached for the lamp beside her bed, then stopped herself. Light would give away her position. Instead, she slipped out of bed in the darkness, her bare feet silent on the cold floor. The footsteps moved through the kitchen, toward the stairs. Emma grabbed the poker from beside the cold fireplace in her room. It was heavy, solid. Not much of a weapon, but better than nothing. The footsteps started up the stairs. 1 step, 2, 3. The door handle turned. Emma swung. Whoa! Daniel caught the poker inches from his face, his eyes wide with shock. "It's me! It's me!" Emma's legs gave out. She would have collapsed if Daniel hadn't caught her. "I heard footsteps," she gasped. "I thought, I know. Daniel helped her sit on the edge of the bed. "I was checking the locks. Couldn't sleep either." Emma's whole body was shaking. She couldn't make it stop. "Hey!" Daniel knelt in front of her, his hands on her knees. "Hey, look at me." She looked. "You're safe," he said. "You're safe. I've got you. I almost hit you with a poker." "Yeah, you did." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Good instincts." Emma laughed. A broken, hysterical sound that turned into a sob. Then another. Then she was crying. Really crying. For the first time since her mother died. Daniel didn't say anything. He just pulled her into his arms and held her while she fell apart. "I'm sorry," she choked out. "I'm sorry. I never." His hand stroked her hair. "You don't have to apologize for being human. I'm so tired." The words came from somewhere deep inside her. "I'm so tired of being strong all the time, of pretending everything's fine when nothing's been fine for years. Then stop pretending." Daniel's voice was rough. "At least with me. You don't have to be strong with me." Emma pulled back to look at him. In the darkness she could barely make out his features, but she could feel the warmth of his breath, the solidness of his presence. "Why?" she whispered. "Why do you care what happens to me?" Daniel was quiet for a long moment. "Because you're the first person since Catherine who's made me feel like there might be something worth waking up for." His voice dropped even lower. "Because when I look at you, I don't just see a woman who needs help. I see a woman who survived things that would have destroyed most people. And that makes me want to be stronger, better, worth something." Emma's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "Daniel, I know." He pulled away, putting distance between them. "I know it's too soon. I know you've got enough to deal with without me adding to it. He ran a hand through his hair. "I needed you to know, in case something happens. I needed you to know that you matter to me, to William, to this family we're building." Family. The word wrapped around Emma's heart and squeezed. "We're not a family," she said softly. We're whatever we decide to be." Daniel's eyes found hers in the darkness. "That's the thing about starting over. You get to choose." Before Emma could respond, a scream split the night. "William." They were both running before the echo died. William's room was at the end of the hall. Daniel reached it first, slamming through the door with Emma on his heels. The window was open, cold air poured in, and William was gone. "No." Emma's scream tore from her throat. Daniel was already at the window looking out into the darkness. "Tracks." He said, his voice deadly calm. 2 sets of boot prints. They took him out through the window. Emma couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but stare at William's empty bed, at the tangled blankets, at the wooden horse toy lying abandoned on the floor. "Get dressed." Daniel's voice cut through her paralysis. "We're going after them." But now Emma. 2 minutes later she was dressed and downstairs. Daniel had his rifle and his pistol, and he was shoving supplies into saddlebags with quick, efficient movements. "They've got maybe 10 minutes on us," he said. "Ground's frozen, but there's enough snow to track them. What if it's a trap?" "It is a trap." Daniel's jaw was set like granite. "But they've got my son." "I don't have a choice." Emma grabbed his arm. "Let me come with you." "No, it's too dangerous. He took William to get to me. This is my fault. I have to." "Emma." Daniel turned to face her. "If something happens to both of us, William's got nobody. I need you to stay here. I need you to ride to town and get the sheriff, by the time I get to town and back." "I know." Daniel's voice cracked. "But if I don't come back, if the worst happens, William's going to need someone who loves him. Can you do that? Can you promise me you'll take care of my boy if I can't?" Emma's eyes filled with tears. "I promise." Daniel nodded once. Then before she could react, he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her. It was brief, fierce, desperate. "Stay alive," he said against her lips. "That's an order." Then he was gone, disappearing into the darkness on horseback. Emma stood in the doorway watching until she couldn't see him anymore. Then she ran for the barn. She wasn't going to town. She was going to find William. Emma had lied to Daniel, and she didn't feel guilty about it. William was her responsibility, her fault. If Victor had taken him to get to her, then she was going to be the one to get him back. She wasn't much of a rider, hadn't been on a horse more than a handful of times in her life, but she managed to saddle the gentlest mare in Daniel's stable and point her in the direction of the tracks. The moon was bright enough to see by, and the boot prints were clear in the snow. 2 sets like Daniel had said, one smaller than the other. William had been walking, not carried. That meant he was conscious, unhurt maybe. Emma pushed the mare faster. The tracks led east toward the mountains, away from town, away from help, into territory Emma didn't know. She'd been riding for maybe 20 minutes when she heard it. A voice, high and frightened. "William." Emma dismounted and tied the mare to a tree, then moved forward on foot, staying low. Using the trees for cover, she crested a small rise and saw them. A cabin, small, run down, probably an abandoned trapper shelter. Light flickered through the cracks in the shuttered windows, and standing guard outside, rifle in hand, was one of the men from earlier, the one with the scar. Emma's mind raced. Daniel would be tracking the main trail. He'd find the cabin eventually, but eventually might be too late. She needed a distraction. Moving carefully, she circled around to the back of the cabin. There was no guard here. They probably figured they were safe this far from civilization. They'd figured wrong. Emma found a window with broken shutters. Through the gap she could see inside. William sat on a wooden chair, his hands tied behind his back. His face was streaked with tears, but his chin was up, defiant. Victor Ashford stood over him, talking in a low voice Emma couldn't quite hear. Her blood boiled. She looked around for anything she could use. A rock, a stick, something. Her hand closed around a rusted horseshoe half buried in the snow. Not much, but enough to cause trouble. Emma took a deep breath, said a prayer to whatever God might be listening, and threw the horseshoe at the cabin's front wall. It struck with a loud clang. "What the hell?" The guard's voice. Footsteps crunching through snow, moving toward the sound. Emma didn't hesitate. She grabbed a rock from the ground, climbed through the broken window, and dropped into the cabin. Victor spun around. "You!" Emma threw the rock. It caught him square in the forehead. He staggered backward, cursing, blood streaming down his face. "Miss Emma!" William's voice was pure joy. "You came. I came." Emma was already behind him, working at the knots binding his hands. "Hold still, sweetheart. I've got you." "Behind you!" William screamed. Emma turned just in time to see Victor lunging for her. She dodged, but not fast enough. His fist caught her shoulder, sending her sprawling. You miserable little witch." Victor's face was a mask of blood and fury. "You've ruined everything." Emma scrambled backward. "William, run. I'm not leaving you. William, go find your papa, now." William hesitated for one agonizing second. Then he ran his small body shooting through the cabin door and into the darkness. Victor made a grab for him but missed. "Jenkins," he roared. "Get the boy." The guard's voice came from somewhere outside. "Boss, I think there's someone else out here." A gunshot split the night. Victor froze. Emma's heart stopped. Then Daniel's voice rang out clear and cold. "Next one goes through your head. Both of you drop your weapons and get on the ground." Victor's face contorted with rage, but he wasn't stupid. He raised his hands slowly. "This isn't over, Thornton." "Yeah, it is." Daniel appeared in the doorway, rifle trained on Victor's chest. Behind him the guard lay face down in the snow, hands behind his head. "William, you okay?" "I'm okay, Papa." William's voice came from somewhere behind his father. "Miss Emma saved me. She threw a rock at the bad man's head." Despite everything, Emma felt a hysterical laugh bubble up in her throat. Daniel's eyes found hers. "You were supposed to go to town." "I lied. I noticed." Something flickered in his expression. Not anger, something warmer. "We'll talk about that later." "Looking forward to it," Victor sneered. How touching. The dirt farmer and his mail-order bride. "You think this changes anything? I have friends. Lawyers. Connections that reach all the way to the territorial governor. You can't touch me." "Maybe not." Daniel's voice was ice. "But Sheriff Cooper can. And after tonight you've given him plenty of reason to try." As if summoned by his name, the sound of multiple horses reached Emma's ears. Sheriff Cooper appeared moments later, flanked by 4 deputies. "Got your son's message," the sheriff said to Daniel. "Boy rode into town screaming bloody murder. Woke up half the population." His eyes moved to Victor. "Mr. Ashford, can't say I'm surprised to find you here. This is a misunderstanding, Sheriff. These people attacked me. Save it." Sheriff Cooper's voice was flat. "We've got 3 other women in this territory who will testify to your misunderstandings. Been building a case against you for months. Tonight just gave me the excuse I needed." Victor's face went pale. "You can't arrest me. My lawyer can meet you in my jail." The sheriff nodded to his deputies. "Take him. And that one too." Emma watched as Victor Ashford was dragged away in chains. He was still protesting, still threatening, still promising retribution. But there was fear in his eyes now. Real fear. "Miss Emma." William crashed into her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "You came for me." He said, his voice muffled against her dress. "You really came." "Of course I came." Emma held him tight. "I promised I'd keep you safe, didn't I? But you could have been hurt. The bad man could have." "Shh." Emma knelt down to meet his eyes. "Do you know why I came, William? Even though it was dangerous." William shook his head. "Because that's what family does." Emma touched his face gently. "We don't leave each other behind. Ever." William's eyes widened. "Family? If you'll have me." The smile that spread across William's face was brighter than the moon. "Papa!" he shouted. "Miss Emma says we're family. She says she's not leaving." Daniel appeared beside them. His clothes were torn. There was blood on his hands and exhaustion lined every feature of his face. He'd never looked more beautiful to Emma. "That's so?" he asked quietly. "If you'll have me," Emma repeated. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached out and pulled her into his arms. "I'll have you," he said against her hair. "Today, tomorrow, for as long as you'll stay." Emma buried her face in his chest and let herself believe it. For the first time in her life, she let herself believe that this could be real. The ride back to town was slow but triumphant. News had spread fast. By the time their small procession reached Silver Creek, it seemed like half the population had turned out to watch Victor Ashford be led to jail. Emma kept her head high, but she felt every stare, every whisper. Then something unexpected happened. Margaret Brennan stepped forward from the crowd. "Miss Hartley," her voice carried across the street, "I believe I owe you an apology." Emma blinked. "Ma'am, I judged you unfairly when you arrived. Assumed the worst." Margaret's expression was firm but sincere. "I was wrong. A woman who risks her life to save a child she's known for less than a week, that's not a schemer. That's someone with a good heart." A murmur went through the crowd. Then one by one other voices joined in. "She's right. I heard what happened. Ashford kidnapped the boy. My cousin in Denver said Ashford swindled her sister out of $200. Man's been a snake for years. Good riddance." Emma felt something loosen in her chest. She wasn't accepted. Not yet. Not fully. But the tide was turning. Daniel's hand found hers in the darkness. "Told you," he said quietly. "This town comes around eventually." "Eventually," Emma echoed. "I can work with eventually." They took William home and put him to bed. The boy fell asleep almost instantly, exhausted from his ordeal. But safe, whole, alive. Emma sat beside his bed for a long time watching him breathe. "He's okay." Daniel's voice came from the doorway. "Kids are resilient. He shouldn't have to be resilient. He's 7 years old." "I know." Daniel moved to stand beside her. "But he's got you now. He's got both of us." Emma looked up at him. "What happens next trial, probably. Sheriff says they've been collecting evidence against Ashford for months. With what happened tonight, plus testimony from the other women he swindled." Daniel shrugged. "He's going away for a long time. And us." Daniel was quiet for a moment. "What do you want to happen?" It was the first time anyone had ever asked her that question. Not what she needed. Not what she should do. What she wanted. "I want to stay," Emma said. "I want to be part of this family. For real. Not just as a housekeeper." She paused, gathering courage. "I want to stop being afraid. Of wanting things. Of hoping for things. Of letting myself believe that good things can last." Daniel knelt beside her, his face level with hers. "Then stay," he said simply. "Be part of this family. Stop being afraid." He took her hand. "And let me prove to you that good things can last. Give me a chance to prove it." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "It's too soon," she whispered. "We barely know each other, so we'll learn." Daniel's thumb stroked across her knuckles. "We've got time." Did they? After everything that had happened, after all the chaos and fear and violence, could they really just have time? "I don't know how to do this," Emma admitted. "I've never had someone who wanted to stay. Who wanted me to stay. I don't know how to trust it." "Then don't trust it." Daniel's voice was gentle. "Trust me. One day at a time. One moment at a time. And when you're ready to believe, I'll still be here." Emma looked at this man. This gruff, grieving cowboy who'd offered her shelter when she had nothing. Who'd defended her against a town full of gossips. Who'd risked his life to save his son. And hers. "One day at a time," she repeated. "One day at a time." She leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." It wasn't a promise. It wasn't a declaration. But it was a start. And sometimes Emma was learning a start was enough. The trial was set for 2 weeks later. Emma spent those 14 days in a state of suspended animation. She cooked, she cleaned, she cared for William. She went through all the motions of daily life while her mind circled endlessly around the same terrifying thought. She would have to stand in front of the whole town and tell her story. Every shameful detail, every desperate choice, every moment of weakness that had led her to answer a stranger's advertisement and board a train to nowhere. "You're going to wear a hole in that floor." Emma looked up. Daniel stood in the kitchen doorway watching her pace with an expression that was half concern, half amusement. "I can't help it," she said. "Every time I try to sit still I start thinking about the trial. And then I start thinking about what people will say. And then you pace." Daniel crossed the room and took her hands, forcing her to stop moving. "Emma, look at me." She looked. "You're not alone in this," he said. "I'll be there. William will be there. Sheriff Cooper says 3 other women are coming to testify. You're not fighting this battle by yourself. I know that. But Daniel," Emma's voice dropped to a whisper, "what if it's not enough? What if Victor's lawyer twists everything around and makes me look like the villain? What if the jury believes him instead of me? Then we deal with it. Daniel's grip tightened. Together. Whatever happens, we deal with it together. Emma wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe him so badly. But she'd spent too many years learning that hope was a luxury she couldn't afford. What if they find him innocent? She asked. What happens to us then? Daniel's jaw tightened. He won't be innocent. But what if Emma? Daniel's voice was firm. Stop borrowing trouble. We've got enough real problems without inventing new ones. She knew he was right, but knowing and feeling were two different things. I'm scared, she admitted. I've faced down drunks and factory bosses and landlords who wanted to throw me on the street. I've survived things that should have broken me. But this, she shook her head, standing up in front of all those people, telling them my story, letting them judge me. I don't know if I can do it. Yes, you can. Daniel's voice was absolute. You know how I know how? Because you threw a rock at Victor Ashford's head to save my son. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. A woman who can do that can do anything. Despite everything, Emma laughed. It was a small sound, broken and uncertain, but it was real. I was terrified when I threw that rock, she admitted. Bravery ain't about not being scared. Daniel released her hands and cupped her face instead. It's about being scared and doing the hard thing anyway. And Emma Grace Hartley, you are the bravest woman I've ever known. Emma's eyes filled with tears, even braver than Catherine. The question slipped out before she could stop it. She saw Daniel flinch, saw the flash of pain cross his features. Sorry, she said quickly. I shouldn't have. Catherine was brave in her own way, Daniel said quietly. She built a life out here when everyone told her she'd fail. She raised William to be kind and strong. She faced death with more grace than I'll ever have. He paused. But you've been fighting your whole life, alone, with no one to lean on, no one to catch you when you fell. That takes a different kind of courage. Emma didn't know what to say. Don't compare yourself to her, Daniel continued. Don't try to be her. Just be you. That's more than enough. The tears spilled over. Emma couldn't stop them. Daniel pulled her into his arms and held her while she cried. They stood like that for a long time. The morning of the trial dawned cold and gray. Emma dressed in her best dress, the blue cotton she'd arrived in now, clean and pressed within an inch of its life. She pinned her hair up carefully, checked her reflection in the small mirror above her dresser, and tried to recognize the woman staring back at her. She looked different. Not softer exactly, but something had changed in her eyes. Something had opened up that had been closed for a very long time. Miss Emma. William's voice came from the doorway. Papa says it's time to go. Emma took a deep breath. I'm coming. The ride to town was quiet. William sat between Emma and Daniel on the wagon bench, his small hand wrapped around hers. He hadn't let go of her since they'd left the house. Are you scared? He asked. A little, Emma admitted. Papa says it's okay to be scared as long as you don't let it stop you from doing the right thing. Your papa's a wise man. That's what Mama used to say. William paused. She also said Papa was stubborn as a mule and twice as hard-headed, but she always smiled when she said it. Emma felt Daniel stiffen beside her. Your Mama was right about both things, Daniel said gruffly. Now hush up, we're almost there. The town was crowded when they arrived. Word of the trial had spread across the territory, and it seemed like half of Wyoming had turned out to watch. Emma felt their eyes on her as she climbed down from the wagon, heard the whispers. That's her. The mail-order bride. Heard she threw a rock at Ashford's head. Knocked him clean out. Don't look so tough to me. Daniel's hand found the small of her back, steadying her. Ignore them, he murmured. Just keep walking. Emma kept walking. The courthouse was a modest building barely bigger than the general store. But today it felt enormous. Today it felt like the entire weight of Emma's future was pressing down on its wooden walls. Sheriff Cooper met them at the door. Miss Hartley, Daniel." He nodded to them both. "The prosecutor wants to speak with you before we start, just to go over your testimony one more time." "Is that necessary?" Daniel asked. "She's been over it 100 times already." "It's fine." Emma straightened her spine. "I want to be prepared." The sheriff led her to a small room at the back of the courthouse. A young man in a rumpled suit was waiting inside, papers spread across a battered desk. "Miss Hartley." He stood and offered his hand. "I'm James Hartley. I'll be prosecuting Mr. Ashford today." Emma shook his hand. His palm was sweaty. "You're nervous," she said. James blinked. "Excuse me. Your hand is sweating. You keep shuffling those papers. And you've got a twitch in your left eye." Emma tilted her head. "How many trials have you prosecuted, Mr. Hartley?" The young lawyer's face reddened. "This is my first." Emma's stomach dropped. "Your first?" "Yes, ma'am. But I've studied extensively and I'm confident. Victor Ashford has ruined at least 4 women's lives." Emma interrupted. "He kidnapped a 7-year-old boy. He threatened to burn down a family's home. And the territory sends a lawyer who's never tried a case. I understand your concern, but—" "Do you?" Emma's voice hardened. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like nobody expects us to win." James's jaw tightened. For a moment, Emma saw something flash in his eyes, something harder than the nervous young man he'd appeared to be. "Miss Hartley," he said quietly, "I volunteered for this case. The senior prosecutors wanted nothing to do with it. They said Ashford had too much money, too many connections, too much power." He paused. "I took it because I believe you deserve justice, because those other women deserve justice, and because if nobody's willing to fight for the people who need it most, then what's the point of having laws at all?" Emma studied him for a long moment. "All right, Mr. Hartley," she said finally. "Let's make sure we win." The trial began at 10 o'clock. Emma sat in the front row of the gallery, Daniel on one side of her and William on the other. Behind them, the courthouse was packed with spectators, farmers and ranchers, shopkeepers and their wives, people who'd traveled miles to witness what everyone was calling the trial of the decade. Victor Ashford sat at the defense table looking impeccably groomed in an expensive suit. His lawyer, a silver-haired man named Marcus Webb, radiated confidence. Emma's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her thighs to hide the trembling. Judge Harrison, a stern-faced man, called the court to order. "The territory of Wyoming versus Victor Ashford," he announced. "Charges include fraud, breach of promise, kidnapping, and assault. Mr. Hartley, you may proceed with your opening statement." James Hartley rose from his chair. His hands weren't shaking anymore. "Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, "what I'm about to tell you is not a complicated story. It's not a story of misunderstandings or accidents or good intentions gone wrong. It's a story of a predator." He walked slowly past the jury box, making eye contact with each member. "Victor Ashford presents himself as a gentleman, a businessman, a respectable member of society. But behind that mask is something much darker. A man who deliberately, systematically, cruelly targeted vulnerable women for his own profit." Hartley's voice hardened. "Over the next few days you will hear from 4 women who answered Victor Ashford's advertisements. 4 women who traveled hundreds, sometimes thousands of miles to marry a man who never intended to show up. 4 women whose lives were destroyed by his lies." He paused, letting the words sink in. "You will also hear how Mr. Ashford kidnapped a 7-year-old boy named William Thornton, how he dragged that child from his bed in the middle of the night and held him hostage in an abandoned cabin, how he threatened to burn down the Thornton ranch if Emma Hartley, one of his victims, didn't submit to his demands." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. "The defense will try to tell you this is a misunderstanding, that these women are lying, that Mr. Ashford is the real victim here." Hartley's voice dropped. "Don't believe them. Listen to the evidence. Listen to the witnesses. And then ask yourselves what kind of man does these things, and what kind of society lets him get away with it." He returned to his seat. Emma released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Marcus Webb rose for the defense. He strolled toward the jury with the casual confidence of a man who'd won 100 trials. "A compelling performance, Mr. Hartley," he said smoothly. Truly moving. But that's all it was. A performance. Because the facts of this case tell a very different story. Webb's voice was silk. Victor Ashford is a successful businessman who made the mistake of trusting the wrong people. He advertised for a wife perfectly legal and corresponded with Miss Hartley, also perfectly legal. When business complications forced him to delay meeting her train, Miss Hartley made other arrangements. He shrugged. That's not fraud. That's a scheduling conflict. Emma's fists clenched. As for the so-called kidnapping, Webb continued, Mr. Ashford went to the Thornton Ranch to discuss the situation with Miss Hartley. Things got heated. The child wandered off in the confusion and was found a short time later unharmed. He spread his hands. Hardly the dramatic crime Mr. Hartley described. The boy was tied up. Someone shouted from the gallery, "Order." Judge Harrison banged his gavel. "One more outburst and I'll clear this courtroom." Webb smiled thinly. As I was saying, this case is not about a predator and his victims. It's about a successful man being attacked by bitter women who failed to secure the marriages they wanted. It's about jealousy, about revenge, about destroying someone's reputation because they didn't live up to unrealistic expectations. He looked directly at Emma. Don't be fooled by tears and accusations. Look at the evidence and you'll see that Victor Ashford is innocent of these ridiculous charges. He sat down. Emma felt sick. The first witness was Ruth Ashford, a thin woman in her early 30s with haunted eyes and hands that wouldn't stop trembling. Mrs. Ashford, Hartley began gently. Can you tell the court how you met the defendant? Ruth's voice was barely above a whisper. I answered his advertisement in a Boston newspaper. He wrote such beautiful letters, made so many promises. What happened when you arrived in Wyoming? He was there. Ruth's jaw tightened. Unlike the others, he actually showed up for me. We were married within a week, and after the wedding, silence stretched through the courtroom. He took my money, Ruth said finally, everything I brought with me, said he needed it for the ranch. Then he started controlling things, what I ate, what I wore, who I talked to. Did he ever hurt you physically? Ruth pulled back her sleeve. Even from across the room, Emma could see the scars. He did this with a fireplace poker, Ruth said, because I burned the biscuits. A gasp rippled through the gallery. I ran away after 3 months. Ruth continued. Didn't take anything, just ran. He found me, of course, dragged me back, told me if I ever tried to leave again, he'd kill me. How did you finally escape? He got tired of me. Ruth's voice cracked. Found a new woman to prey on. Told me I was worthless, that no one would ever believe me if I talked, and threw me out on the street. She looked at Victor for the first time. I've been waiting 4 years for this day. Marcus Webb's cross-examination was brutal. Mrs. Ashford, if that's even your real name, isn't it true that you have a history of mental instability? Objection. Hartley was on his feet. I'll allow it, Judge Harrison said. Answer the question. Ruth's face paled. I saw a doctor once, after Victor, after what he did to me. A doctor at a sanitarium. Correct, because you had a nervous breakdown, because my husband beat me until I couldn't remember my own name, so you admit your memory is unreliable. That's not what I said. No further questions. Emma wanted to scream. The second witness was a woman named Mary Collins, then Sarah Brennan, then Elizabeth Hart. Each told a similar story. Beautiful letters, broken promises, stolen money, shattered lives, and each time Marcus Webb tore them apart on cross-examination, found inconsistencies in their stories, implied they were liars, gold diggers, women of loose morals who'd gotten what they deserved. By the end of the first day, Emma was exhausted. He's destroying them, she said to Daniel as they walked to the wagon. Every single witness, he's ripping apart. Every single witness, he's ripping them to shreds. What chance do I have? You have the truth. The truth isn't enough. You heard Webb. He's twisting everything, making the women look crazy or desperate or dishonest. Emma. Daniel stopped walking and turned to face her. You're not like those other women? What's that supposed to mean? It means you've got something they don't. You've got me. You've got William. You've got the whole story of what happened at that cabin, including the part where Ashford's men tied up my son." Daniel's voice hardened. "Webb can't explain that away. He can't make kidnapping look like a misunderstanding." Emma wanted to believe him. "But what if I'm not strong enough? You threw a rock at a man's head to save a child you'd known for 2 weeks." Daniel's voice softened. "You're strong enough." Emma took a deep breath. "Okay," she said. "Okay. Tomorrow I'll be ready." Emma's testimony began at 9 o'clock the next morning. She walked to the witness stand with her head high, her heart pounding, and her hands steady for the first time in days. "Please state your name for the record," Hartley said. "Emma Grace." "Hartley. Miss Hartley, how did you come to be in Silver Creek, Wyoming?" Emma told her story from the beginning. The advertisement, the letters, the borrowed money for the train, the empty platform, the humiliation at the general store. She told them about Daniel's offer of employment, about William's mistake at the station, about Victor's first appearance at the ranch and his threats, and then she told them about the kidnapping. "I woke up to William's scream," Emma said. "By the time I got to his room, he was gone. The window was open. There were boot prints in the snow." "What did you do?" "Daniel went after them on horseback. He told me to ride to town for help." Emma paused. "I didn't." A murmur went through the courtroom. "Why not?" "Because William was taken to get to me. It was my fault he was in danger. I couldn't just sit there and wait while someone else fixed my problem. So what did you do?" Emma met Victor's eyes across the courtroom. "I followed the tracks to an abandoned cabin. I climbed through a broken window, and I found William tied to a chair with Victor Ashford standing over him. What happened next? I threw a rock at his head. Someone in the gallery laughed. Judge Harrison banged his gavel, and then I untied William and told him to run. Daniel arrived with Sheriff Cooper shortly after. They arrested Victor and his men." Hartley nodded. No further questions. Marcus Webb stood slowly buttoning his jacket. "Miss Hartley, an emotional story, but I have some questions about the details." Emma's stomach tightened. "You say you followed the tracks to the cabin, in the dark, in the snow, with no experience tracking?" "Yes." "And you climbed through a broken window, silently apparently, since no one heard you coming?" "The guard was distracted." "Convenient." Webb smiled thinly. "You also claim my client was standing over the boy when you arrived. What was he doing exactly?" "Talking to him." "Talking. Not threatening, not hurting, just talking. He'd kidnapped a 7-year-old child, allegedly." Webb raised an eyebrow. "Miss Hartley, isn't it possible that you misinterpreted the situation? That my client was simply trying to negotiate with Mr. Thornton about your living arrangements by dragging a child from his bed in the middle of the night? Children wander. Perhaps William left on his own and my client found him. He was tied to a chair." The words exploded from Emma before she could stop them. The courtroom went silent. Emma's whole body was shaking, but she didn't care anymore. Didn't care about staying calm, about being dignified, about any of the things Hartley had coached her on. Victor Ashford kidnapped a 7-year-old boy. She said, her voice low and fierce. "He tied that child to a chair in an abandoned cabin and used him as bait to trap me. He sent men to threaten burning down the Thornton Ranch. He told me I was his property, that no one would believe me, that he would destroy my life if I didn't submit to him." She stood up in the witness box. "I am not crazy. I am not lying. I am not a gold digger or a schemer or any of the other things you've implied. I am a woman who answered an advertisement because I had nowhere else to go, and I was preyed upon by a monster." Emma pointed directly at Victor. "That man has hurt at least 5 women that we know of. How many more are out there? How many more women has he destroyed who were too scared or too ashamed to come forward?" Her voice broke. "I am terrified standing here. I am humiliated having my life picked apart in front of strangers. But I would stand here 1,000 times if it meant stopping him from hurting anyone else." Emma sat back down, her legs trembling. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Then from the gallery, someone started to clap. 1 person, then 2, then 10. Then the whole room was applauding despite Judge Harrison's furious attempts to restore order. Through the chaos, Emma met Daniel's eyes. He was smiling. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Emma waited in the small room at the back of the courthouse, unable to eat, unable to sit still, unable to do anything but pace and pray. Daniel stayed with her. So did William. What if they find him innocent? William asked for the 100th time. "Then we'll figure something out," Emma said. "Together. Will." Daniel's voice was gentle. "Whatever happens, we're still a family. That doesn't change." The boy nodded, but his face was tight with worry. At 4 o'clock the bailiff came to fetch them. "Jury's back." Emma's heart stopped. She walked back into the courtroom on legs that felt like water. The gallery was packed even tighter than before. Word had spread that a verdict was coming. Victor sat at the defense table, his face carefully blank. But Emma saw his hands. They were clenched so tight his knuckles had gone white. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" Judge Harrison asked. The foreman, a weathered rancher Emma didn't recognize, stood. "We have, Your Honor. On the charge of fraud, how do you find guilty?" A gasp swept through the courtroom. "On the charge of breach of promise, guilty. On the charge of kidnapping, guilty." Emma's knees buckled. Daniel caught her arm, steadying her. "On the charge of assault, guilty." Victor's mask finally cracked, his face contorted with rage. "This is a farce," he shouted. "These women are liars. I'll appeal. Remove the defendant," Judge Harrison ordered. 2 bailiffs grabbed Victor and dragged him toward the door. As he passed Emma, he lunged toward her. "This isn't over," he hissed. "I'll get out. And when I do—" "Get him out," Daniel roared. The bailiffs hauled Victor through the door. His screams echoed down the hallway, growing fainter until they disappeared entirely. Emma stood in the middle of the courtroom, surrounded by cheering spectators, and felt something she'd never felt before. Victory. Real. Genuine. Hard-won victory. Daniel's arms came around her from behind. "You did it," he murmured against her hair. "You won." Emma turned in his embrace to face him. "We won," she corrected. "All of us." William squeezed between them, wrapping his arms around both their waists. "Does this mean the bad man's going away forever?" "For a very long time," Daniel confirmed. "He can't hurt anyone anymore." William's face split into a grin. "Can we celebrate? Can we get candy?" Mama always said candy was for celebrations. Emma laughed, a real laugh full of joy and relief and something that felt dangerously like hope. "I think candy sounds perfect," she said. They walked out of the courthouse together, the 3 of them, into a crowd of people who for the first time weren't looking at Emma with suspicion or judgment. They were looking at her with respect. Margaret Brennan pushed through the crowd. "Miss Hartley." Her voice was gruff, but her eyes were warm. "That was one hell of a testimony." "Thank you, Mrs. Brennan." "Maggie." The older woman almost smiled. "After what you did, I reckon you've earned the right to call me Maggie." It wasn't much. A first name, a small gesture of acceptance. But to Emma, it felt like the whole world had shifted on its axis. She was no longer the mail-order bride who'd been abandoned at the station. She was Emma Grace Hartley, survivor, fighter, winner, and she was finally home. The weeks after the trial passed in a blur of change, Victor Ashford was sentenced to 15 years in the territorial prison. No parole, no appeal. The judge had been merciless, citing the calculated cruelty of his crimes and the need to send a message to other men who might prey on vulnerable women. Emma had watched them lead him away in chains, his expensive suit rumpled, his perfect hair disheveled, his face twisted with impotent rage. She'd felt nothing, not satisfaction, not triumph, not even relief, just emptiness. As if a weight she'd been carrying for so long had finally lifted, and now she didn't know what to do with the space it left behind. "You're thinking too hard again." Emma looked up from the kitchen table where she'd been staring at a cold cup of coffee. Daniel stood in the doorway, his expression soft with concern. "Sorry," she said. "Just processing. That's a lot of processing for 6 in the morning. Couldn't sleep." Daniel crossed to the stove and poured himself coffee. He moved differently now, Emma had noticed. Less rigid, less guarded, as if the trial's outcome had released something in him too. "William's still asleep," he said. "First time in months he hasn't had nightmares. That's good. He deserves peace. So do you." Emma's hands tightened around her cup. "I don't know what peace feels like." Daniel sat down across from her. "Then maybe it's time you learned." The silence between them stretched, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that came from two people who'd been through hell together and didn't need words to understand each other. "The town's different now," Emma said finally. "People actually smile at me. Maggie Brennan invited me to her quilting circle. You going to go?" "I don't know how to quilt." "So you'll learn." Daniel's eyes held hers. "You're good at learning new things." Emma felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Am I?" "You learned how to be a mother to a boy who wasn't yours. You learned how to stand up in front of a courtroom and tell your truth. You learned how to throw a rock hard enough to knock out a grown man." The corner of Daniel's mouth twitched. Quilting should be easy by comparison. Despite everything, Emma laughed. It felt strange. Good strange. Like a muscle she'd forgotten she had. "What about us?" she asked. The question hung in the air. Daniel's expression shifted, became more serious, more vulnerable. "What about us? The trial's over. Victor's gone. I don't need protection anymore." Emma's voice dropped. "If you want me to leave, do you want to leave?" "No." The word came out before she could stop it. "No, I don't want to leave. But I don't want to stay just because you feel obligated." "Emma." Daniel reached across the table and took her hands. "I don't feel obligated. I feel—" He stopped, struggled for words. "I ain't good at this," he admitted. "Catherine always said I had the emotional vocabulary of a fence post. But what I feel for you isn't obligation. It's not gratitude or convenience or any of those practical things we told ourselves at the beginning." Emma's heart was pounding. "Then what is it?" Daniel's grip tightened. "It's the way I look for you first thing every morning. It's the way your laugh makes me feel like maybe the world ain't as dark as I thought. It's the way William lights up when you walk into a room, and the way I light up right alongside him." His voice roughened. "It's love, Emma, plain and simple. I love you, and I think I've loved you since you stood on that train platform with nothing but a broken suitcase and refused to cry." Emma couldn't breathe. "Daniel, you don't have to say it back." His voice was urgent. "I know it's complicated. I know I'm still carrying grief for Catherine, and you're still healing from everything that happened. But I needed you to know." He paused. "Whatever you decide, wherever you go from here, I needed you to know that you are loved, completely, without conditions, without expectations." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "I've never. No one's ever." "I know." Daniel's thumb stroked across her knuckles. "That's why I'm not asking for anything. I'm just telling you what's true." Emma stared at their joined hands, at the calluses on his palms, at the scars on his fingers from years of hard work, at the simple gold band he still wore on his left hand. "You're still wearing your wedding ring," she said. Daniel looked down as if noticing it for the first time. Yeah, I guess I am. Does that mean—" "It means I'm not ready to take it off." Daniel's voice was steady. "But it doesn't mean I'm not ready to move forward. Catherine is part of me. She always will be. But she's not my future anymore." He looked up. "You could be, if you want to be." Emma felt something crack open inside her chest. All her life she'd been told she wasn't enough, not pretty enough, not refined enough, not valuable enough. She'd learned to survive by expecting nothing, by keeping her heart locked away where no one could reach it. But Daniel had reached it anyway, with his quiet strength, his broken heart, his stubborn refusal to let her push him away. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I know. I don't know if I can be what you need. You already are. But—" "Emma." Daniel stood and pulled her to her feet. "Stop arguing with me. For once in your life, just let something good happen." He kissed her. It was soft at first, tentative, a question more than a statement. Emma answered it. She wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him back with all the desperate hope she'd been afraid to feel. Kissed him until they were both breathless, until the coffee went cold on the table, until the sun finished rising and flooded the kitchen with golden light. When they finally broke apart, Daniel's forehead rested against hers. "Stay," he said. "Not as my housekeeper, not as a guest. Stay as my partner, my equal, my—" "Yes." Daniel blinked. "Yes, yes, yes, I'll stay. Yes, I love you too. Yes, I want to build a life with you and William. And—" Emma's voice broke. "Yes to everything. Yes to all of it." Daniel's face transformed. The grief and exhaustion that had lived in his features for so long seemed to lift, replaced by something brighter, something that looked almost like joy. "Papa, Miss Emma." They jumped apart as William's footsteps thundered down the stairs. The boy burst into the kitchen, his hair wild, his face alight with excitement. "I heard you talking. Are you getting married? Please say you're getting married. Billy Henderson's mama got remarried last year, and he got a new papa and 2 Christmases. And—" "William." Daniel held up a hand. "Slow down. But are you getting married?" William's eyes darted between them. "Because I asked God every night if he could send someone to be my new mama, and then Miss Emma came, and she looks like mama, and she's nice like mama, and she makes biscuits almost as good as mama's, and—" "William." Emma knelt down to meet his eyes. "Would you be okay with that? If I married your papa?" William's face went serious. "Would you be my real mama then? Not just Miss Emma, but Mama Emma's throat tightened. If that's what you want, it's what I want more than anything." William threw himself at her, nearly knocking her over. "Please say yes. Please, please, please say yes." Emma looked up at Daniel over William's head. "I already said yes," she whispered. William's whoop of joy could probably be heard in the next county. The wedding was small. Emma had insisted on that. After everything that had happened, she didn't want spectacle. She wanted simplicity, authenticity, something real. They held it at the ranch in the front room where Emma had first started to feel like she belonged. Reverend Matthews performed the ceremony. William stood beside them as ring-bearer, practically vibrating with excitement. The guest list was modest: Sheriff Cooper and his wife, James Hartley, Maggie Brennan, Dr. Williams, a handful of neighbors who'd become friends in the weeks since the trial. Emma wore a dress she'd sewn herself, simple blue cotton with white lace at the collar. Not fancy, not expensive, but it was hers, made with her own hands, and that mattered more than silk or satin ever could. "You look beautiful," Daniel said when he saw her. "You're supposed to say that. I'm saying it because it's true." He took her hands. "You ready?" Emma looked around the room, at the people who'd gathered to witness this moment, at William, who couldn't stop grinning, at Daniel, whose eyes held nothing but love and hope and the promise of a future she'd never dared to dream about. "I've been ready my whole life," she said. "I just didn't know it." The ceremony was brief. Traditional vows spoken simply without embellishment. "Do you, Daniel Thornton, take Emma Grace Hartley to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." "And do you, Emma Grace Hartley, take Daniel Thornton to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Emma thought about her mother, who died believing her daughter would never find happiness. Thought about the factory in Massachusetts where she'd worked her fingers raw, dreaming of something better. Thought about the train platform in Silver Creek where she'd stood alone and terrified with nothing but a broken suitcase and fading hope. "I do," she said, and she meant it with every fiber of her being. "Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Wyoming, I pronounce you husband and wife." Reverend Matthews smiled. "You may kiss the bride." Daniel kissed her, and the small crowd erupted in applause. William squeezed between them, wrapping his arms around both their waists. "Does this mean I can call you Mama now?" he asked Emma. "For real?" Emma's eyes filled with tears. "For real, sweetheart. Forever and always. Best day ever." The celebration afterward was simple, but joyful. Maggie had baked a cake. The neighbors had brought food. Someone produced a fiddle, and before long the furniture had been pushed back and people were dancing in the front room. Emma watched from the edge of the crowd, still not quite believing this was her life now. "You're not dancing." She turned to find Daniel beside her. "Neither are you. I'm waiting for my wife." He held out his hand. "May I have this dance?" "Mrs. Thornton? Mrs. Thornton?" The name wrapped around her like a warm blanket. "I don't really know how to dance," Emma admitted. "Neither do I." Daniel pulled her close. "We'll figure it out together." They swayed in each other's arms, not really dancing, just holding on. Around them the party continued. Laughter, music, the sound of a community celebrating something good. "Thank you," Emma whispered. "For what?" "For seeing me. When everyone else looked at me and saw a problem or a scandal or a cautionary tale, you saw me." Daniel's arms tightened around her. "How could I not?" "You're the most real person I've ever known. No pretense, no games, just you, honest and brave and stronger than you know. I wasn't strong, I was terrified. That's what makes it courage." Daniel pulled back to look at her. "Being scared and doing it anyway. That's the definition of bravery, Emma, and you've been brave every single day since you stepped off that train." Emma thought about that, about all the moments when she'd wanted to run and hadn't, when she'd wanted to hide and stood her ground instead, when she'd wanted to give up and found one more reason to keep fighting. Maybe Daniel was right. Maybe she was braver than she'd ever realized. "I want to build something here," she said. "Something real, something that lasts." "We will." Daniel's voice was a promise. Together. 6 months later, spring came slowly to Wyoming. The snow melted. The brown grass turned green. And Emma planted a garden. Vegetables mostly, but also flowers along the front of the house. Catherine's favorites, William told her proudly. Sunflowers and daisies and wild roses. It felt right somehow. Honoring the woman who'd come before while building something new. William flourished under the attention of 2 parents. His nightmares faded completely. His laughter returned bright and frequent. He started calling Emma Mama without hesitation, and every time he did, her heart grew a little bigger. The ranch prospered too. Daniel had been struggling to keep up with everything alone, but with Emma managing the household, he could focus on the land and the animals. They hired a hand to help with the heavier work. A young man named Jacob who'd answered their advertisement in the paper. The irony wasn't lost on Emma. Advertisements had brought her nothing but pain. But they'd led Jacob to an honest job and a fresh start. Maybe that was a kind of redemption. One evening in late May, Emma sat on the porch watching the sunset. Daniel was in the barn finishing evening chores. William was inside, supposedly doing his letters, but probably sneaking bites of the cookies she'd baked that afternoon. "Mrs. Thornton." Emma turned. A woman stood at the edge of the yard, clutching a carpet bag, looking like she might bolt at any moment. She was young, maybe 20, with hollow cheeks and eyes that had seen too much. Emma's heart seized. She knew that look. She'd seen it in her own mirror for years. "Can I help you?" she asked, rising slowly. "I heard." The woman's voice trembled. "I heard you took in a stranger once when she had nowhere else to go." Emma's throat tightened. "Who are you?" "My name's Lydia. Lydia Price." The woman's hands twisted around the handle of her carpet bag. "I came here to marry a man named Harrison Blake. But when I got to town, he'd already married someone else. And now I've got no money and no family and nowhere to." Her voice broke. Emma was already walking toward her. "Come inside," she said gently. "You must be hungry. I've got stew on the stove and fresh bread." Lydia's eyes went wide. "You'd help me?" "Just like that. You don't even know me." "I know enough." Emma put a hand on the woman's shoulder. "I know what it's like to be alone in a strange place with nothing but hope and a broken suitcase. I know what it's like to be disappointed by someone who made promises they never intended to keep." She guided Lydia toward the house. "And I know that sometimes the only thing standing between a person and despair is one small act of kindness." Daniel emerged from the barn as they reached the porch. His eyes moved from Emma to Lydia, taking in the situation in an instant. "Got room at the table for one more?" he asked. Emma smiled at him. "Always." They fed Lydia, let her cry, let her tell her story, and when she was done, they offered her the same thing Daniel had once offered Emma: a place to stay, honest work, a chance to get back on her feet. "I don't understand," Lydia said, staring at them with something like wonder. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" Emma exchanged a look with Daniel. "Because someone did it for me once," she said simply. "And it changed my life." That night, after Lydia was settled in the spare room and William was asleep, Emma stood by the window looking out at the moonlit prairie. Daniel came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "You okay?" "I was just thinking about how strange life is." Emma leaned back against his chest. "A year ago I was on a train heading toward a man who never intended to marry me. I had nothing. I was nobody. I thought my life was over." She turned in his arms to face him. "And now I have everything. A husband who loves me, a son who calls me mama, a home, a community, a purpose." Daniel kissed her forehead. "You always had purpose. You just needed someone to remind you. You did more than remind me." Emma's voice thickened. "You saved me. We saved each other." Daniel's hands cupped her face. "That's what family does." Family. The word still felt new, still felt precious, like a gift she'd never expected to receive. "Do you think Catherine would have approved?" Emma asked. "Of us?" Daniel was quiet for a moment, considering the question seriously. "I think she would have loved you," he said finally. "I think she would have seen exactly what I see, a woman with a good heart and an iron spine, a woman who puts others before herself, a woman who makes her son laugh and her husband grateful every single day." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "I wish I could have known her. You know her through William, through the love she poured into this house." Daniel smiled softly. "She's still here, Emma, in the garden you planted, in the recipes you cook, in the way William says his prayers at night, just like she taught him. She's not gone. She's just waiting until we see her again." Emma nodded, unable to speak. They stood together in the darkness, holding on to each other and to the life they'd built from the ruins of their separate griefs. And as Emma looked out at the ranch, at the home she'd found in the most unexpected way, she finally understood something she'd been struggling to grasp since she first stepped off that train. She wasn't broken anymore. She wasn't lost. She was exactly where she was meant to be. The greatest love story wasn't the romance she'd found with Daniel, though that was beautiful and true and growing stronger every day. It wasn't the family she'd built with William, though he was her whole heart. The greatest love story was the one she'd finally learned to tell herself, the story that said, "You are enough. You have always been enough, and you deserve every single good thing that comes your way." Emma Grace. Thornton, once a mail-order bride nobody wanted, had finally come home, not because someone had given her a place, but because she had claimed it for herself, and that made all the difference. 3 years passed like water flowing through willing hands. William was 10 now, tall for his age, with his father's quiet strength and his mother's gentle heart. Both his mothers. He spoke of Catherine without pain and called Emma Mama without hesitation. The two women lived in his heart side by side, and that was exactly as it should be. Emma stood in the garden on a morning in late spring, her hand resting on the swell of her belly. 6 months along. A daughter, the doctor said. They would name her Catherine Grace, a bridge between past and future. Daniel appeared beside her, slipping his arms around her waist from behind. His left hand was bare now. The gold band that had lived there for 15 years, rested in a box on Catherine's grave, returned with love and gratitude and the promise that she would never be forgotten. He wore a new ring now, simple silver engraved with Emma's initials intertwined with his own. "We did it," Emma said softly, looking out at the ranch, at William playing with Jacob's dog in the yard, at the flowers blooming wild and bright. "We built something real. We did." Daniel kissed her temple. "And we're not done yet." Lydia emerged from the house no longer the frightened girl who'd arrived a year ago. She was smiling now, confident, wearing an engagement ring from Jacob. Another story of redemption. Another circle completed. Emma watched it all and understood. She hadn't just found a home. She'd become one. For William, for Daniel, for Lydia, for the daughter growing inside her, for everyone who needed to believe that broken things could be made whole again. The boy's scream that had started this journey seemed like a lifetime ago now, but Emma could still hear it sometimes in quiet moments, not with fear, but with gratitude, because that scream had led her here, to this place, to this family, to herself, and that Emma Grace Thornton knew with absolute certainty made all the difference in the world.